Welcome to today's episode, and we are talking all about how to sell your business for top dollar. And so I'm here with my co-host, John McLaren, and what we love doing is we love helping businesses sell for top dollar. So we call it grow, scale, and exit. We love to help people grow their business, then scale their business, and then exit it. So John, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chantel. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. Let's talk about some of the biggest questions that people ask us all the time.
Yeah, so I think one of the first ones is just I think a little bit about you, about the business, like why are you so passionate about building businesses that can sell, helping other people sell their businesses? Just kind of how did you get into this and so passionate about it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that everyone kind of says about entrepreneurship is that it's kind of like they believe it's a life sentence. And I just don't believe that like you have to build a business for hundreds of years. So like, most of us as entrepreneurs, like we do our best work in a creative setting for the first couple of years. And there's a premium on like problem solving. I always say it's like when you start a business, it's like lifting off for a plane, right? Like it's so hard in that beginning. You're doing all the problem solving, you're overcoming challenges. And then once a business reaches a few million in annual revenue, might be someone better fit to build it because you're just sometimes you get exhausted. And a lot of what we did, we built that business on inertia and we end up kind of creating something. And there's a guy here in Tampa, Florida, and he built a brewery and he really did it great. He built it. He then built a second location. And once he did that, he was like, you know what? I'm out. Like I've done what I've done. I've built it. I've done it. I'm ready to sell it. And so we need to make it okay that a lot of these podcasts out there is like, you need to run this company before you die. And I want
Yeah,
to get rid of that. What do you think?
yeah, exactly right. The psychology of a small business owner, they're not getting into it originally to scale it and sell it. It's their passion project in a lot of ways, or at least it's something that they're very competent in. They get into it thinking, I'm going to build this thing and I'm going to be in it long term. And there's not a thought in the world about their exit strategy. And so I think this is a great forum to express that even if you're not planning an exit strategy at this point, start to think about it in that way. Start to have a little bit of thought about how you could maximize your exit along the way. And if you never exit, you've probably made your business better by maximizing your exit strategy, even if you stay with it. So I think you're absolutely right. Nobody thinks of it in that way, and they really should, even if they plan to own it long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, you've looked at tons and tons of businesses. You've helped people sell their businesses. You've run many businesses yourself. Obviously, you're a successful real estate professional. You've written books. You've got multiple revenue streams, multiple verticals, built a bunch of businesses. So, between your own experiences and helping others, what's your secret to having a happy and successful exit?
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's one guy that I know that sold his business. And, when he got the check, he actually started breaking down in tears. And so, like, at first, he was like,
Bittersweet moment.
yeah, like he got the check and he was like so happy. And then not long after that, probably an hour later, he ended up just going home and he was like in a puddle of tears. And I think that's
It's like a broken up relationship almost, like
yeah.
it's time to move on, but you're still really sad that it's over, yeah, very emotional, I think, for a lot of
Well,
people.
well, we fall in love with our businesses, and one of the things me and you always say is that we're the people that have to tell someone that their baby is ugly because you literally think
Right.
that your business is your baby because you've raised it, you grew it, you've been with it for the 15 years, and selling a business can be an emotional roller coaster, and there's obviously the high of achieving what you set out to achieve. Like I grew it, I was able to sell it. But at the same time, there's something that I call the dream factor, and then it's the dread factor. And I kind of explain it like this. There's a guy that I know that lived out west and he was landlocked and he always dreamed to live on a sailboat and live by the beach. And so he decided he's going to sell his business. And he actually sold his business for 2.5 times profit for his company. And he was totally thrilled because he then went to live his dream. He moved to Florida. He lived on a boat. That's what he dreamed to do. And what I believe is the happiest exits are the ones where the entrepreneur not only sells it for a great multiple, but they also know what they're going to do next and they're living their dream of what they're doing next.
Yeah,
The
you got to know
ones,
your why. You got to know your why.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the ones that are not happy, I call the dread factor. And that is the reason why they're selling is because they hate the employees. They can't stand what they're doing anymore. They've done it for 20 years. They just are done. And so the reason why they're selling is the dread factor. And that's where you have to go. Am I selling it because I'm chasing a dream that I want? Or am I selling it for the dread factor? And it could be both. But if you have the dream, it's a lot prettier exit on the other
And
side.
that's kind of where we get into our initial consult with any business owner is really trying to discover whether they're the everything to the business or whether they're, zoomed out a little bit. Are you working on your business or are you working in your business, right? And that is a big thing. It's a big thing about a business owner's happiness, right? If they've been in it 20 years and the business cannot operate without them, that gets to be very stressful. That's your business owner we talk to that is stressed to the max. They want to get out of it, but they haven't prepared themselves well for that exit, like we were just talking about, because you have to be able to then buy the business for the person buying it. You've got to replace the lifeblood of the business and still have it work. Whereas somebody who's moved to working on their business, that person is honestly very replaceable, right? Because the business operations are all handled by other people besides the business owner, and somebody can replace them without knowledge of the industry or really anything else, and that business will keep on smooth sailing after the exit. So that's one of the big things that we're trying to get to the bottom of in that initial consult is like, which one of those business owners are you?
Absolutely, for sure.
The next question I have for you is what every entrepreneur is kind of asking. How much am I going to get for my business? What's a good multiple for different types of businesses, e-commerce, service-based businesses? We come from the real estate world. So, maybe a real estate business, a mortgage business, some type of service industry. And so is it a different multiple for each sector? What should I expect when selling? And how much does it matter whether I'm that entrepreneur that the business revolves around or the one who is zoomed out and operations can take place without them?
Yeah, so the one that gives you the highest multiple, I mean, the multiples are crazy. We're talking about 10 times values and stuff like that. But the best example I can give you is there's a guy named Jay Steinfeld. He built a company called blinds.com. And, he created blinds.com and he actually became the number one blinds company in America. And, one of the things they did is they created a way to install blinds in a it's complicated to do blinds because you got to make sure you measure it right. You got to pick the color. There's lots of complexity
Yeah,
to
it's
it.
a product and a service.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And so when they decided to sell, the person who ended up buying them was Home Depot. And the reason why they got such a high value for blinds.com is because Home Depot wasn't number one in blinds. Of course, they wanted to be number one, but they were doing, what they wanted is, first of all, blinds.com was doing about 100 million in revenue. Blinds.com was doing 100 million in revenue. Home Depot was doing nowhere close to that.
And
So you,
Home Depot has always struggled to solve the service side. They've
yes.
got the product side dialed, but they can't figure out how to monetize the service side. People walk in there to buy things and they want to help them get them installed if they don't want to DIY it, but they can't figure that out. So yeah, that's
But
interesting.
not only do they want to get the service side more efficient, they also wanted to get the online e-commerce part to work because
Right.
they were still doing everything via brick and mortar. And so the main reason why Home Depot bought blinds.com is because they thought, okay, I need to learn Jay's secret sauce for how to sell complicated products that need to be installed on a website. So that's the knowledge that they really wanted. So that's why he sold it for such a high multiple. And so this is what we call a strategic acquisition. And so when there's a strategic acquisition, you're going to get such a higher multiple. And I think that if you think about this, Home Depot, they kind of cared about being number one in the blinds category, but not really. That wasn't their strategic thing. They wanted to go, look, we've got all these other things that we need to be able to sell online. Look at how much money we could save if we didn't have to have everybody coming to the brick and mortar, and we
Yeah.
could figure out what their secret sauce is. And so that was the proprietary knowledge that they wanted to learn. So if you can have that, that's when you get that 10 times multiple. So that's where you're going to get a 10 times value or even more when you have a strategic partnership.
And I think that that brings us back to what we were talking about earlier about what type of business are you, right? Because blinds.com doing 100 million in sales, they've got bigger companies that feel like they can learn something from them, can grow that business. And so on that side of things where it's like everything is perfect and you're going to be acquired by a huge national brand, a publicly traded company, you could be looking as high as a 10 times multiple. Although I would say those businesses probably trade more in the 6 to 8 range, and 10 is kind of the outside if you've got a business like that. We might have a lot of listeners though who they want to sell their chain of 3 nail salons or something much smaller than a blinds.com, and I would say that those could range honestly from a 1 times multiple if it's a very small business, service based, everything revolves around the owner. There's no employees, right? Like I had one on the other end of that spectrum. I had one about 2 years ago. It was in the real estate space. We knew the guy because he had been servicing our real estate company for a long time, and he did the signs for us, right? A real estate agent gets a new listing, they call this guy, his company comes out, gets Miss Utility to mark the grass, they put the post sign in the yard, they put our sign up so that we've got our marketing out there for the signs, right? And we look at his business, and he's doing about $25,000 a year in gross sales. He's got this yard full of hundreds of these 4x4 post signs, and he has no employees. He does everything himself. And he's like, well, what do you think this business is worth? And it's almost like pretty much nothing. I mean, we listed it for sale for 30,000 to begin with. It was a little over a 1 times multiple. We ended up at 15,000 before we pulled the plug because our buyer had to be somebody who wanted that job,
Yeah.
right? They wanted to grab the post signs from his house and bring them to their own house. They wanted to start receiving the calls and doing the routes and installing the post signs themselves. Every call I got about it was somebody who didn't want to do that. They wanted to hire a $20 an hour employee to do it and take the money that was left over, the profits, and there wasn't any. You had to do it yourself, right? So that's the other side. Your blinds.com example was the perfect business, so for the highest possible multiple. And this other one was the other side of it, right? The one that's very difficult. Like you had said in the beginning, we got to tell you your baby is ugly. And we've
Yeah,
been
and
doing that. Yeah.
yeah, my new example that I love to give is because my son loves baseball. And so I talk about like, okay, are you in the little league? Are you in the major league? Are you in, professional? And I feel like why so many entrepreneurs can't reach the pro level is because of ego, because they think, kind of like the example you just gave, is that they never get to that transition from grinding and doing everything yourself to realizing that that becomes a liability as the business grows, and they never make that shift. And
And
so
sometimes that's ego, and sometimes that's fear, and sometimes that's your business can't scale past you. You know, that you sometimes you got to realize when you've started a business that can't scale beyond you, and you probably need to put your entrepreneurial endeavors into something new. You know, it can be any of those. Like I think the sign business, for instance, I don't know if he could have grown that to 4 or 5 times the size and had an employee and kind of just answered the calls and did you know entrepreneurial work only and had a successful business. I don't know if that is possible in that business, right? So you sometimes you got to have a real frank conversation. Is your business able to move beyond you? Or is it ego? Is it fear? Or is it just a bad business endeavor that's got you stuck?
yeah, so one of my favorite lines is that revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity. But now that I'm doing business brokering, I've kind of changed it a little bit to say revenue is vanity and value is sanity. And it's because I heard on this podcast where this business owner, he built a $15 million company in revenue and he sold it for about 25% of 1 year's revenue. And then I watched another interview where the company was only doing 2 million in annual revenue and they sold it for 12 times revenue. So, that's where you have to just constantly say, okay, revenue is for vanity, but value, what is if I sold this business today, what is that value? And,
Yeah.
that's a big
And it
deal.
it depends on what industry you're in a lot too. I mean, you hear all the time about tech companies selling for basically infinite multiples because they're not profitable yet when they sell for billions of dollars. And so it also depends on what sector you're in, what's the potential upside of your business. So there's no one size fits all answer to that. And that's why the way that we operate is we have an initial consultation call with you to kind of hear about your business. We decide whether you might benefit from some coaching to keep operating the business yourself. If you need some coaching to get you prepared for an exit, which might be a year or two in the future, or if you're ready for an exit today.
Well, and the number one thing that we coach people on, and we've been able to do it over and over, is we've been able to coach people on how they can add recurring revenue. Because
Mm-hmm.
the number one thing of any business, it doesn't matter if it's an e-commerce business where maybe there's no recurring revenue, but the biggest thing is every dollar of recurring revenue is worth significantly more than transactional revenue. So you have to figure out, and it's unbelievable. I want to give people some examples and I want you to throw some in there as well. But because we can see businesses at this level, we can come up with recurring revenue so much easier because it's kind of like the forest and the trees. People can't see it, but we come in and we literally can see what we can do to get people on an auto ship, get people into a recurring revenue thing like a flower shop. So my favorite story is I have a good friend of ours that's actually selling their flower shop right now. And one of the things that we've talked about is the flower shop industry, in my opinion, is the worst business you can possibly have because
Hard business.
horrible,
Yeah.
horrible because it's like Mother's Day and Valentine's Day takes up that's a majority of your business. And literally the traditional flower shop throws out about 60% of their inventory because the flowers spoil. And
Yeah.
so now we've helped companies where the flower shop can change it to where it literally puts it on a subscription model to where you sell to just hotels, where 5-star hotels, they buy fresh flowers all the time. And guess what? And they get rid of that 60% of flowers that spoil because they only buy enough flowers of what's on the subscription model. So that math changes everything.
It really does. That's a great example of a business that's so hard to figure out your inventory and when you need staff. You can't have where 2 weeks a year you need 6,000% more inventory than normal and 500% more employees than normal for those 2 weeks. That's a tough business to scale.
And the car wash, a perfect example is car wash business. We had a car wash that wasn't doing well because they finally got on the model where you can have the all you can eat car washes,
Right,
charge
right.
$30 a month, and now their business is completely changed because of it. So it's a game changer.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the why we offer those multiple services, right? Yeah, because coaching sometimes is the best way to start. You call us thinking about what can I sell my business for? I want to sell my business, and the best strategy might be for you to spend 1 or 2 more years under our coaching, getting yourself ready for an exit.
Yeah. And one of the things that I tell people is like a lot of people, their wealth is so tied up into their business. And with AI coming in, there's all kinds of things. I call it the freedom scale. And basically it's when you can sell your company where you can create enough wealth to live the rest of your life. And if you reach that point and you don't sell, you're actually effectively gambling because all your wealth is remained tied up into an illiquid asset, and
Yeah,
selling converts that risk into freedom. So a perfect example is, let's just pretend you owned a bunch of video stores back in the day before
yeah,
like you had all this cash flow and everything was going good. Here Netflix, maybe you weren't Blockbuster, maybe you just owned 8 video stores. Well, if you didn't sell it before Netflix came into play, again, you now are effectively gambling because your wealth is tied up into that illiquid asset, which is really an important thing to think about.
yeah, absolutely. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about is just kind of the importance of marketing in any business, where sometimes what we do coaching wise is largely marketing based, and what you see in businesses and like sort of how they're failing or how they could be better maximized in that department.
Yeah, I always like to say, welcome to Moe's, MOE, marketing over everything. Marketing is definitely my strength. I love it. I'm super passionate about it. I help businesses. That's one of the things that I love to help businesses with, is get their marketing under control, because I always like to say there's really only 2 ways that you can do marketing. Either you do outbound marketing where they call you, or you're going to make cold calls and start knocking on doors or, ringing the phone.
Yeah.
And that way just doesn't really work anymore. People don't want you knocking on their door. People aren't even answering the phone to do outbound calls anymore.
No,
So
no,
you
they're
have
not.
to learn how to do marketing. And so that's one of the strengths that we have to help people so that they can get the lead flow coming in and getting those leads and learning that process of converting those leads so you can get your multiple a lot higher.
And I think again, going back to that initial consultation and why it's so hard to make any blanket statements about what type of multiple you might get, or what businesses are easy to sell, right? Because one of the big things in that initial interview that we're going to have with you is surrounding your marketing. Are you
Yeah.
doing it all yourself? Are you doing any? Are you door knocking? Are you, running $100,000 of ad spend a month on all these different channels? Like, where are you in your marketing journey, and what is the best way to maximize your marketing efforts for the particular type of business you're in?
Yeah, and one of the questions we'll ask you is, do you want to sell to private equity? And I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the horror stories of, kind of the one guy, remember where we heard about that he sold, private equity bought 60% of his business and then he kept 40%, but he decided he wanted to wash his hands clean and then walked away. And then the business started tanking and then he lost everything. You want to kind of talk about that and
Right.
some of the nightmares of private equity?
Yeah, and I would say it doesn't even have to be a sale to private equity. And it's not uncommon for who, depending on the type of business, the scale of the business, for whoever buys the business to want or need you to stay on as the owner, right? You may be thinking that you're gonna like get your check and be free and clear of this business, but in most businesses, they want you to stay on for 30 days to help with the transition. And in more complicated businesses or businesses where everything centers around you, which we talked about at the beginning, which kind of business are you? You might be asked to stay on and even offered a salary for 2 to 5 years to really help this transition. So in the scenario you're talking about, we talked to somebody and they ended up selling 60% of their business. They were asked to stay on for, I think it was a 3 year period after that, and they would retain 40% of their equity, right? So they would stay in the business, they would they would retain that portion of the equity, and that's what would incentivize them to stick with the business, help with the transition, keep it earning while the transition is happening. And that business owner, they agreed to that, but really in their mind and in their heart, they wanted to be done. And so they got into, they're doing the same thing they've always been doing, but now they don't own it. They don't own a majority stake. And psychologically, that can be very difficult to keep your spirits up and keep working. And that person started kind of, not enthusiastically participating in the business anymore. And it was a business where everything revolved around them. And the business tanked. Their 40% equity went from millions of dollars to nearly zero. And that can be one of those things where if we analyze your business centers, everything revolves around you. You might not be able to have a clean exit. And there's some risk involved with keeping your equity and keeping working in the business.
One of the things that I do want to say is one of the things I'm seeing that's happening with a bunch of the negotiations that we're seeing is earnouts. And what I mean by earnouts is, let's say a business, someone wants to come in and buy your business and they want to buy it for $1 million, but the value of the business maybe is $2 million. And they say, I'll pay $1 million down, or I'll put $500,000 down, and then I'll take 50% of the profit for the next however many years until I get it to, let's say they agreed on 1.5 million once it was done. Well, so now you've got $1 million on the table, but earnouts are really risky because you want to, if possible, tie them to top line revenue and not profit. Because once you sell, you lose control of all expenses. So once you lose control of all expenses, they could say, I want a salary of 300,000. And another option is to tie the earnout to something you control, like launching a specific feature or hitting a specific milestone, or I'm going skiing this weekend. I'm not a big skier. I think I told you, John, I'm great skier, but I can't stop real well. So I got a big
Right.
X on my thing for not for like running into people.
Right.
But
You're
earnouts
that
are
out of control skier.
yeah. So earnouts are gated like a ski course. And if you miss a gate, it's very hard to recover. And so if you can figure out if you're going to do the earnout model, you have to figure out a way to do that that it makes sense. And if you can tie it to revenue, it's a lot better than tying it to profit
And
because
that's why I love doing these podcasts, because I think it really does educate business owners of what exiting their business might look like. I think most people who aren't, running $20 million businesses and have all these lawyers and accountants and people who have been guiding them along the way. But your smaller businesses, I think most of those people think, I'm going to list my business for sale. Somebody's going to write me a check and I'm going to be done. Right. And that's the way it works. But that's not always the way it works. And it maybe not even often the way that it works, because you're right. I mean, they're going to want you to stay on to help operate and smooth the transition. They are going to want to propose some money down and some of it seller financed, or some of it you retain some equity, or all the things we just talked about. There's a lot of different ways that a business sale can transact, and a lot of different proposals that you might get that are out of left field to you if all you've been doing is, running your flower shop for the last 10 years and this really isn't your area of expertise. So we want to educate people and have them not shocked by the different ways that business buyers are structuring offers and deals.
Yeah, and I do want to say that 80% of business owners never exit successfully, and not because they didn't work hard. It's because their company wasn't built to sell. And so most businesses are too dependent on the owner. The financials aren't structured properly. The valuations are inflated. The buyers see risks that the owner didn't ever see. And so we love to help you. We actually can get you on a free strategy call where we help you uncover what's reducing your company's value right now. What are the red flags that you need to look for? And whether or not right now is your business sellable in its current structure. There's no hype, there's no pressure. It's just clarity. And so if you plan to exit someday, even if it's years from now, this conversation is crucial. And so if you want to book a call with us, we'd love to talk to you. You can book your free call today if you go to canzell.com. We'd love to. And there's tons of free resources on there as well that we'd love to kind of go over with you and share them with you. We love to just educate you. That's one of the things that we're so passionate about, both of us. We love to teach you how to grow, how to scale and exit. And we are Canzell Business Advisors, and we want to give you clarity, scalability, and real strategies to create value and maximize your exit. And we will help you prepare for that transition. So, John, I think this was great. I think we gave them a lot of value, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad to be here. That was fun.
Yeah, it was so fun. And if you want a smarter way to either buy a business or to exit a business, there's lots of tools on canzell.com. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Bye bye for now.